Some souls don't ascend after death. They descend into realms so dark that Cayce called them the borderland of consciousness where desire still binds the spirit. In his trance states, Edgar Cayce revealed something that contradicts everything you've been told about the afterlife. Not everyone moves toward the light. Some souls, trapped by their earthly attachments and unrepentant choices, find themselves in lower vibrational planes where spiritual growth becomes agonizingly difficult. These aren't metaphorical hells. Cayce described them as actual dimensional spaces where consciousness experiences the consequence of how it lived. What's terrifying is that he explained how easily a soul can end up there, and how the life you're living right now is determining which realm you'll inhabit when your body dies. The choices you're making today, the thoughts you're nurturing, the way you're treating others, all of it is setting your vibrational frequency for what comes next. Are you preparing your soul for ascension, or are you unknowingly anchoring yourself to the lower planes? Share in the comments what aspect of Cayce's afterlife revelations challenges you most. Edgar Cayce spoke about the afterlife with a clarity that should make every person reconsider how they're living right now. During thousands of readings conducted in deep trance states, he described the structure of consciousness after death in ways that shattered comfortable religious assumptions. What he revealed wasn't a simple heaven or hell binary. Instead, Cayce described a complex spectrum of dimensional planes, each vibrating at different frequencies, where souls naturally gravitate based on the spiritual development they achieved during physical life. The lower realms exist. Cayce was explicit about this. These aren't places of eternal damnation in the traditional sense, but they are spaces of profound spiritual difficulty where souls experience the consequences of choices made during incarnation. He described these planes as existing in closer proximity to Earth's vibrational frequency, populated by entities still deeply attached to physical desires, material concerns, and earthly consciousness. The souls inhabiting these realms aren't there because God condemned them. They're there because they condemned themselves through how they chose to live. What makes a soul descend rather than ascend? Cayce's readings pointed to specific spiritual conditions that anchor consciousness to lower vibrational planes. Selfishness stood at the center of this spiritual gravity. Those who lived primarily for personal gain, who exploited others for advantage, who refused to see beyond their own desires, these souls found themselves in environments that reflected the very consciousness they cultivated. The lower realms, according to Cayce, mirror back to the soul its own spiritual state. If you lived in darkness, you enter darkness. If you created suffering, you experience the weight of that suffering. But it's more nuanced than simple moral judgment. Cayce explained that attachment itself creates spiritual weight. A person obsessed with wealth during life doesn't suddenly lose that obsession at death. The consciousness continues with its desires intact, but now exists in a realm where those desires cannot be satisfied in familiar ways. Imagine craving physical pleasures, material possessions, or earthly power while existing in a dimension where such things don't exist as they did before. This creates a state of frustration, confusion, and suffering that Cayce described as characteristic of the lower planes. The souls stuck in these realms often don't immediately realize they've died. Cayce revealed that many entities in the borderland areas remain confused about their state, still attempting to interact with the physical world, still pursuing the same desires that dominated their earthly existence. They become what spiritual traditions call earthbound spirits. Consciousnesses so attached to physical reality that they hover near the earth plane, unable or unwilling to move toward higher dimensions. Their vibrational frequency simply won't allow ascension until they release what's holding them down. Sexual obsession, addiction, hatred, resentment, and vengeance. These were among the spiritual weights Cayce identified as particularly binding. A person who died consumed by hatred doesn't shed that hatred automatically. The emotional and mental patterns cultivated over a lifetime become the soul's reality in the afterlife. Without a physical body to distract from these patterns, the consciousness experiences them with intensified clarity. The lower realms become immersive environments where the soul confronts the very nature it built for itself. What's the experience actually like in these dimensions? Cayce described them as shadowy, dense, and heavy, with the accumulated thought forms of similarly vibrating entities. These aren't places of fire and brimstone in a literal sense, but rather psychological and spiritual states of being. The torment comes from within, from unfulfilled desires, from the weight of harm caused to others, from the soul's growing awareness of opportunities wasted during physical incarnation. There's a crushing realization that occurs. The life just lived was a test, and the soul failed to use it for spiritual growth. Time operates differently in these realms. What might be experienced as eons of suffering could be relatively brief in earthly time measurement or vice versa. Cayce explained that the soul's experience of time is subjective, determined by its state of consciousness. A soul in torment experiences every moment as prolonged agony. The good news, if it can be called that, is that these lower realms aren't eternal prisons. They're more like spiritual hospitals or rehabilitation centers, places where souls must work through the consciousness they created before they can progress upward. Can souls escape the lower realms? Yes, but it requires something many souls resist: genuine transformation of consciousness. Cayce taught that spiritual helpers, more evolved entities, and even the Christ consciousness itself can reach into these lower dimensions to assist willing souls. But the soul must become willing. It must recognize its condition, accept responsibility for how it arrived there, and genuinely desire to change its fundamental nature. This is why spiritual growth during physical life is so critical. It's far easier to develop positive consciousness while incarnated than to attempt transformation from the confused, dense state of the lower planes. Prayer from living loved ones can help. Cayce revealed that the thoughts, prayers, and spiritual intentions of those still on earth can reach souls in the lower dimensions and provide genuine assistance. This is why many spiritual traditions emphasize praying for the dead. Those prayers create energetic lifelines that souls in darkness can use to pull themselves toward light. But again, the soul itself must choose to grasp that lifeline. Free will continues after death. No one can force a soul to evolve against its will. Now here's where this becomes personally urgent for you. Everything Cayce described about the afterlife suggests that your current life is creating your future reality. The consciousness you're building right now through your daily choices, thoughts, and actions is determining your vibrational frequency. Are you cultivating compassion or selfishness? Are you growing spiritually or stagnating in material pursuits? Are you healing your resentments or feeding them? These aren't abstract spiritual questions. They're practical determinants of where your soul will find itself after death. Cayce emphasized that physical death doesn't transform consciousness. Death is simply a transition, a changing of environments. The person you are when you die is the person you'll be immediately after death. If you're spiritually unprepared, confused about your purpose, attached to earthly desires, or carrying heavy burdens of unforgiven harm, you'll carry all of that into the afterlife. The lower realms are populated by souls who simply weren't ready for what came next, who lived without considering the spiritual consequences of their choices. This is why spiritual preparation matters immensely. Living consciously, with awareness of your soul's eternal nature, changes everything. When you recognize that every interaction is spiritually significant, that every choice either elevates or degrades your consciousness, that every thought contributes to the person you're becoming, you start living with the kind of intentionality that prevents getting stuck in lower realms. You become someone who's building spiritual muscle, someone who's preparing for ascension rather than descent. What would Cayce say about how most people are living today? Based on his teachings, he would likely be deeply concerned. Modern life encourages exactly the kinds of attachments that bind souls to lower planes. The obsession with material success, the endless pursuit of pleasure, the cultivation of image and status, the entertainment-driven distraction from spiritual reality, all of this develops consciousness that's unprepared for what death actually is. People are sleepwalking through their soul's opportunity for growth, and they'll wake up in dimensions that reflect that spiritual negligence. The Christ consciousness, which Cayce described as humanity's pattern and goal, represents the way out and the way up. Jesus demonstrated the fully realized human soul, the consciousness that transcended lower vibrational pulls and achieved unity with the divine. Every soul has this potential. Every person can develop Christ-like consciousness, not through religious performance, but through genuine transformation of how they see themselves, others, and reality itself. This is what saves a soul from lower realms, becoming increasingly aligned with love, service, forgiveness, and spiritual awareness. If you're watching this and feeling uncomfortable, that discomfort might be the most valuable thing you experience today. It might be your soul recognizing truth and alerting you that changes need to happen. Cayce taught that the soul knows its own condition. Deep within, you know whether you're on a path that leads upward or downward. You know whether your life reflects spiritual purpose or spiritual avoidance. You know whether you're becoming more loving or more selfish, more aware or more distracted, more aligned with your divine nature, or more identified with temporary physical existence. The lower realms aren't inevitable for anyone. They're the consequence of specific choices repeated over time. Every person has the capacity to live in ways that ensure ascension rather than descent. It starts with honest self-assessment. Look at your life right now. What dominates your thoughts? What drives your decisions? How do you treat people when no one's watching? What are you really living for? These questions reveal your spiritual trajectory. Before we continue, if this exploration of Cayce's afterlife teachings is resonating with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're building a community of people who are serious about spiritual growth and understanding the deeper realities of existence. Your engagement helps this content reach others who need to hear these truths. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss upcoming videos where we'll explore Cayce's teachings on soul preparation, karma, and the higher realms of consciousness. The concept of vibrational frequency is crucial to understanding Cayce's afterlife structure. Everything is energy vibrating at different rates. Physical matter vibrates slowly and densely. Higher spiritual dimensions vibrate rapidly and subtly. Your consciousness has a frequency determined by its quality. Love, compassion, forgiveness, service, spiritual awareness. These elevate your frequency. Fear, hatred, selfishness, materialism, spiritual ignorance, these lower your frequency. After death, your consciousness naturally gravitates to the dimensional plane that matches its vibrational rate. This isn't judgment from an external God. It's simply spiritual physics. A soul vibrating at low frequency cannot exist comfortably in high-frequency dimensions, just as a soul that has elevated its consciousness cannot remain in lower realms. You go where you fit. The lower realms are populated by souls whose consciousness fits those dense, shadowy, desire-heavy environments. They're not being punished. They're experiencing the natural consequence of the consciousness they developed. But here's the redemptive truth Cayce repeatedly emphasized. Spiritual evolution is always possible. No soul is ever abandoned. The divine, the Christ consciousness, the spiritual helpers and guides, they're always working to assist souls toward higher development, including those stuck in lower dimensions. The question is never whether help is available. The question is whether the soul will accept that help, which requires humility, self-honesty, and willingness to change fundamentally. Many souls resist this change, even in the lower realms. Cayce described entities so identified with their earthly patterns, so convinced of their own righteousness, so attached to their resentments and desires, that they refuse assistance. They'd rather cling to familiar suffering than undergo the transformation necessary for ascension. This is the real tragedy. Not that souls are condemned by God, but that souls condemn themselves by refusing to evolve. What does spiritual preparation actually look like? According to Cayce, it's surprisingly practical. It means living each day with awareness that your thoughts and actions have eternal significance. It means treating others with the same compassion you hope to receive. It means forgiving those who've harmed you, not for their sake, but for your own soul's liberation. It means pursuing spiritual knowledge and practice with the same dedication most people reserve for career and entertainment. It means examining your motivations constantly, asking whether you're serving your ego or serving the divine. It also means confronting your shadow, those aspects of yourself you'd prefer to ignore. Cayce taught that everything you deny during physical life must eventually be faced. The lower realms become places where souls confront what they refuse to acknowledge about themselves during incarnation. Imagine dying and suddenly seeing clearly all the harm you caused, all the opportunities you wasted, all the selfishness you justified, all the spiritual truth you ignored. That awareness itself creates the suffering of lower dimensions. Wouldn't it be wiser to do that confrontation now, while you have the support of physical life to make changes? This is what spiritual practices are really for, creating safe containers to face your own darkness, transform it, and elevate your consciousness before death makes that confrontation unavoidable. Meditation, prayer, self-examination, service to others, spiritual study, these aren't religious obligations, they're soul preparation exercises. Consider what Cayce revealed about souls who lived primarily for themselves. After death, they find themselves in realms where that selfishness becomes their entire reality, surrounded by other self-centered entities, unable to manipulate or exploit others as they did in physical life. They experience the emptiness of ego-driven existence without any of the temporary pleasures that made it tolerable on earth. It's a kind of spiritual claustrophobia, being trapped inside your own limited consciousness with no escape except through the hard work of transformation. Contrast this with souls who used physical life to develop spiritually. Cayce described their afterlife experience as entering realms of light, beauty, harmony, and continued growth. These are dimensions where consciousness expands rather than contracts, where the soul's true nature as a divine being becomes increasingly apparent, where communion with higher beings and eventually with God becomes possible. Same death, completely different destination, determined entirely by how consciousness was developed during life. Are you living like someone who expects to ascend? This is the question that should haunt you in the best possible way. It's the question that transforms how you approach every day. When you truly internalize that your current choices are determining your afterlife reality, everything changes. That person who irritates you becomes an opportunity to practice patience. That temptation to act selfishly becomes a chance to choose differently. That moment of anger becomes an invitation to forgiveness. Every experience becomes spiritual training. The lower realms serve a purpose in the cosmic structure. They're not mistakes or cruel punishments. They're necessary spaces where undeveloped consciousness can work through its own creations. Cayce taught that the entire universe is designed for soul growth, and sometimes growth requires experiencing the consequences of our choices in undeniable ways. The lower realms provide that experience. They're teaching dimensions, however harsh those lessons might be. But you don't have to learn through suffering in the afterlife. You can learn through conscious choice during physical life. This is the gift of incarnation, the opportunity to grow spiritually in an environment where the consequences of choices aren't quite so immediate or intense as they are after death. Physical life is soul training with safety rails. You can make mistakes, learn from them, change course, and develop the consciousness that will ensure your ascension. What about people who seem good but aren't particularly spiritual? Cayce's readings suggested that moral goodness alone isn't enough. A person can live ethically while remaining spiritually asleep, focused entirely on earthly concerns, never contemplating their eternal nature or their relationship with the divine. After death, such souls might not descend to the lowest realms, but they won't ascend to the highest either. They'll find themselves in intermediate planes, still separated from full spiritual awareness, still needing to develop the consciousness that recognizes its divine source. This is why Cayce emphasized that spiritual awakening during physical life is crucial. It's not enough to simply avoid harming others. You must actively develop your divine nature. You must grow in love, wisdom, spiritual awareness, and connection with God. You must become increasingly Christ-like, not through religious adherence, but through actual transformation of consciousness. This is what determines your afterlife experience far more than any religious affiliation or moral scorekeeping. As we approach the end of this exploration, I want to be direct with you. If you've watched this far, you're likely someone who senses that spiritual reality matters. You're someone who knows deep within that life is more than material existence and death is more than an ending. That inner knowing is your soul trying to wake you up fully. Listen to it. Act on it. Don't let the distractions of modern life lull you back into spiritual sleep. If you found value in this deep dive into Cayce's afterlife teachings, show your support by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment sharing your thoughts on spiritual preparation. Your engagement helps this content reach others who are searching for these truths. The most important thing you can do right now is assess your spiritual trajectory honestly. Where are you headed? If you died today, which realm would your consciousness naturally gravitate toward? That question should produce a clear, instinctive answer. If the answer creates discomfort, that's actually good. It means you're seeing truth and have the opportunity to change course. Edgar Cayce's entire life work was dedicated to helping people understand these spiritual realities while there's still time to prepare properly. Your soul has a mission. You're here to grow spiritually, to develop your divine nature, to learn love and wisdom, to serve others while preparing for eternal existence. Every day you spend distracted from that mission is a day wasted. Every moment you choose selfishness over service, fear over love, material pursuit over spiritual development, you're building consciousness that will struggle in the afterlife. The lower realms are populated by souls who forgot their mission, who thought earthly life was the point rather than the preparation. Don't be one of those souls. Don't end up in dimensions of darkness, confusion, and spiritual struggle because you were too busy, too distracted, too comfortable, or too skeptical to take your spiritual development seriously. The teachings are available. The path is clear. The choice is yours. Edgar Cayce spent his life trying to wake people up to these realities. His readings still speak across decades, offering the same urgent message. Prepare your soul, because death is certain and what comes after is determined by who you become now. What will you do differently starting today? That's the question you should be sitting with as this video ends. Not what interesting information did you learn, but what will you actually change? Because information without transformation is worthless. Knowledge without application is spiritual negligence. You now know what Cayce revealed about the lower realms and why souls get stuck there. You know the spiritual conditions that create that outcome. You know that your current life is determining your afterlife reality. The only remaining question is whether you'll use this knowledge to transform how you live, or whether you'll file it away as interesting content and continue on the same path that leads downward. Your soul knows which choice serves your highest good. Make that choice. Your dreams aren't random brain noise. They're actual visits to dimensional planes where your soul goes every single night, and Edgar Cayce's trance readings reveal that most people have no idea they're living a second life while their body sleeps. What you experience in those vivid dreams isn't symbolic fiction created by your subconscious. It's your consciousness operating in realms that are just as real as the physical world, perhaps more real, where you meet other souls, receive spiritual instruction, and work out karma that directly shapes your waking life. Cayce explained in his readings that the dream realms function as training grounds, meeting places and reflection chambers for the soul, and the experiences you have there have immediate consequences for your spiritual development and daily circumstances. Right now, tonight, when you close your eyes, you'll travel to these dimensions again, but will you remember? Will you understand what your soul is actually doing there? Share in the comments. What's the most vivid dream you've ever had that felt more real than reality itself? The moment you fall asleep tonight, something extraordinary happens that Edgar Cayce spent decades documenting through his psychic readings. Your consciousness doesn't simply shut down or generate random mental movies. Instead, according to Cayce's extensive trance sessions, your soul actually detaches from your physical body and travels to what he called the dream realms, dimensional planes of existence that operate under different laws than our physical reality, but are every bit as structured, populated, and purposeful. These aren't metaphors or psychological constructs. Cayce insisted these are actual places, or more accurately, states of consciousness where souls gather, learn, communicate, and work through spiritual development that has direct, measurable impact on their waking lives. Think about your most vivid dreams for a moment, the ones where colors seemed impossibly bright, where you could fly or move through walls, where you met people you've never seen in physical life but somehow knew intimately, where the emotional intensity exceeded anything you felt while awake. Cayce would tell you those weren't just dreams. Those were your most conscious moments in the other realms, the times when you were fully present in dimensions your soul inhabits every night. In his readings, Cayce described how consciousness exists on multiple levels simultaneously, and what we call dreaming is actually the soul's natural state of being when it's not constrained by physical matter and the limited sensory perception of the body. The dream realms, as Cayce explained them, are organized in layers or dimensions, each vibrating at different frequencies. The realm closest to physical reality is what he sometimes called the borderland, where dreams feel most like distorted versions of waking life. You're in familiar places, doing familiar things, but everything's slightly off, illogical, fragmented. Cayce taught that this borderland is where most people spend their sleep time because their consciousness hasn't developed the clarity to fully navigate higher dimensions. It's like wading in the shallow end of an infinite ocean because you haven't learned to swim in deeper waters yet. The symbolism you see here, the bizarre combinations of daily life elements, these represent your mind's attempt to translate higher dimensional experiences into familiar physical world concepts. But beyond this borderland exist realms of stunning clarity and purpose. Cayce described planes of existence where souls gather for instruction from more advanced spiritual beings, where great temples of learning exist that have no physical counterpart on earth, where your soul meets with guides and teachers to review your life progress and plan your next steps of development. He spoke of reunion places where souls who knew each other in past lives or are connected through spiritual bonds come together, regardless of whether their physical bodies are sleeping in the same country or even the same century. Time doesn't function in the dream realms the way it does here. Past, present, and potential futures blend together because you're operating in dimensions where linear time is just one option among many. In his readings, Cayce explained that every soul travels to these realms nightly, but the quality and depth of the experience varies dramatically based on spiritual development and consciousness level. Someone living a primarily material existence, whose thoughts during waking hours focus exclusively on physical pleasures, possessions, and earthly ambitions, will have shallow, fragmented dream experiences because their soul hasn't developed the vibrational frequency to access higher realms. Their consciousness stays close to the physical plane even during sleep, producing dreams that feel chaotic, meaningless, or simply forgotten upon waking. Meanwhile, someone who dedicates time to spiritual practice, meditation, and serving others will naturally access deeper dimensions during sleep, returning with vivid memories of profound experiences, meetings with advanced beings, and specific guidance for their life path. This is why Cayce repeatedly stressed that your waking consciousness directly determines your sleeping consciousness. The thoughts you hold, the emotions you cultivate, the intentions you set during your waking hours, these establish the frequency at which your soul vibrates, and that frequency determines which dimensional planes you can access when you sleep. If your mind is filled with anger, resentment, fear, or selfish desires, you'll find yourself in lower vibrational dream states, possibly encountering what Cayce called the earthbound realms, where souls who were deeply attached to material existence or negative emotions congregate. These aren't pleasant places. They're dimensions where confusion, distress, and spiritual darkness predominate because the souls there haven't learned to raise their vibration toward the light. But when you approach life with love, compassion, service, and spiritual seeking, Cayce taught that you gain access to realms of extraordinary beauty and wisdom. He described dream experiences where individuals found themselves in crystalline cities of light, in natural landscapes of impossible beauty that Earth's physical matter could never replicate, in the presence of beings radiating such love and wisdom that the dreamer, awakened, transformed. These aren't fantasies or wish fulfillment. According to Cayce, these are actual dimensional planes where advanced souls reside and work, and your soul can visit them, learn from them, and bring back knowledge that surfaces in your waking consciousness as inspiration, intuition, and sudden understanding. What's fascinating about Cayce's teaching on the dream realms is how practical and specific he made it. He didn't speak in vague, mystical terms, but rather described concrete things that happen in these dimensions and why they matter for your earthly life. For instance, Cayce explained that many of the people you meet in dreams are actual souls you're encountering in these other dimensions. Sometimes they're people you know in physical life, and you're meeting their souls while both your bodies sleep, working out conflicts, deepening bonds, or planning future interactions that will later manifest in physical reality. Other times they're souls you knew in past lives, reconnecting with you to heal old karma or continue spiritual work you began together in previous incarnations. And sometimes they're advanced beings, guides, or what Cayce called elder brothers, souls who have progressed far beyond the earthly cycle and serve as teachers in these higher dimensions. Consider this. Have you ever awakened from a dream where you had an intense conversation with someone, maybe someone you've never met in waking life, and the words they spoke stayed with you for days or even years? Have you ever received an answer to a problem in a dream, or gained clarity about a difficult decision? Cayce would say that wasn't your imagination creating helpful scenarios. That was your soul actually receiving instruction in the dream realms, meeting with a guide or teacher who gave you the specific wisdom you needed, and you brought that knowledge back across the dimensional boundary into your waking consciousness. The more spiritually attuned you become, the more clearly you can remember and apply this nightly instruction. Cayce also taught that the dream realms serve as testing grounds and practice arenas for spiritual development. In his readings, he explained that souls often work through challenges in the dream dimensions before facing them in physical life, or alternatively, continue working on issues during sleep that they struggled with during waking hours. A person trying to overcome anger might find themselves in dream scenarios specifically designed to trigger that anger, giving them opportunities to practice choosing differently in an environment where the consequences aren't as severe as in physical reality. Someone learning compassion might encounter suffering souls in dreams and have the chance to offer help, strengthening that spiritual muscle in preparation for similar situations in their waking life. This completely reframes what dreams are and why they matter. You're not just passively watching your brain sort through the day's information. You're actively participating in your soul's education, working through your spiritual curriculum in dimensions specifically structured for growth and learning. Every night is an opportunity, and every dream is potentially a significant experience in your soul's journey. The question becomes, are you conscious enough to make the most of it? Are you remembering these experiences? Are you bringing back the lessons and applying them? If this resonates with you, if you're realizing that your spiritual life doesn't pause when you sleep, but actually intensifies, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're going deeper into Cayce's teachings on how to become more conscious in the dream realms and why this matters more than most spiritual seekers realize. Cayce provided specific guidance on how to improve your experiences in the dream realms, and it all starts with preparation before sleep. He emphasized that the last thoughts you hold before drifting off carry tremendous importance because they set the vibrational tone for where your consciousness will travel. If you fall asleep scrolling through disturbing news, engaging in arguments, or ruminating on fears and frustrations, you're essentially programming your soul to enter lower vibrational dimensions where similar energies predominate. But if you consciously choose to fill your mind with prayer, gratitude, spiritual reading, or loving thoughts before sleep, you're tuning your consciousness to frequencies that grant access to higher realms. In his readings, Cayce often recommended a simple but powerful practice. Before sleeping, pray for divine protection and guidance. Ask to be used in service even while your body rests, and set the intention to remember your dreams and bring back helpful knowledge. This isn't religious superstition, it's practical dimensional mechanics. You're stating your intention, aligning your will with higher purposes, and essentially requesting clearance to enter dimensions where positive spiritual work happens. Cayce taught that spiritual beings who oversee these realms respond to sincere intentions and will facilitate experiences that serve your soul's development if you genuinely ask for help. The quality of your waking life also determines your dream realm experiences in ways most people never consider. Cayce explained that holding grudges, nursing resentments, or harboring unforgiveness creates energetic anchors that keep your consciousness trapped in lower dimensions during sleep. When you refuse to forgive someone, you're literally binding your soul to them in negative ways that persist beyond waking hours. You'll encounter them or their energy in the dream realms, And instead of experiencing freedom and spiritual advancement, you'll find yourself stuck in repetitive, frustrating scenarios that mirror your waking entanglements. Forgiveness, from Cayce's perspective, isn't just emotionally healthy, it's dimensionally liberating. It releases your consciousness to travel to higher planes where real growth happens. Similarly, Cayce taught that service and compassion during waking hours open doorways in the dream realms. When you genuinely help others, when you act from love rather than selfishness, when you prioritize spiritual values over material gain, you're building what he called spiritual currency that grants you access to higher dimensional experiences. Souls who serve others in the physical world often find themselves serving in the dream realms too, helping lost or confused souls, working with guides to send healing energy to those in need, or participating in what Cayce described as councils or gatherings, where spiritual work of cosmic significance takes place. Your waking kindness translates into sleeping opportunities for even greater service. But here's something Cayce emphasized that challenges common spiritual assumptions. The dream realms aren't separate from reality. They're actually more foundational than physical reality. He taught that what happens in these higher dimensions often manifests later in the physical world, meaning your dream experiences are sometimes previews, preparations, or even causes of your future waking experiences. That meeting you had with someone in a vivid dream might be your soul arranging a physical encounter that will happen weeks or months later. That solution you received to a problem might be practical guidance from a higher intelligence that will prove accurate when you apply it. That warning or premonition might be your soul perceiving probable futures and trying to guide you toward better choices. This is why Cayce placed such importance on dream recall and interpretation. He didn't see dreams as meaningless mental clutter to be ignored, but as vital communications from your soul's nighttime activities that deserve serious attention. He recommended keeping a dream journal, writing down dreams immediately upon waking before the details fade, and learning to recognize the difference between symbolic messages and actual dimensional experiences. Some dreams, Cayce explained, are indeed symbolic, your higher self using imagery to communicate truths your conscious mind needs to understand. But other dreams are literal experiences in other dimensions, and learning to distinguish between the two takes practice and spiritual development. Cayce also revealed something that might shock modern spiritual seekers who've been taught that dreams are always personal and individual. Many people share dream spaces. In his readings, he described how souls with karmic connections, family bonds, or shared spiritual missions often inhabit the same dream realms simultaneously, working together on projects or challenges that involve all of them. You might actually be interacting with your family members' souls while everyone sleeps, having conversations or experiences that influence your waking relationships even though no one consciously remembers the details. Groups of souls with similar spiritual development levels tend to gravitate toward the same dimensional planes, creating communities in the dream realms just as real and meaningful as communities in physical life. This communal aspect of the dream realms explains some peculiar phenomena Cayce addressed in his readings. People who report having the same dream as someone else aren't experiencing coincidence. They're remembering a shared experience in a mutual dream dimension. Groups who meditate together or share deep spiritual bonds often discover they're meeting in the dream realms regularly, even if they live far apart physically. Cayce taught that distance means nothing in these dimensions. Souls can connect instantly based on vibrational affinity, spiritual bonds, and conscious intention, regardless of where their physical bodies happen to be sleeping. What becomes clear in Cayce's teachings is that the dream realms represent a massive portion of your existence that most people completely ignore or dismiss as meaningless. Think about it. You spend roughly a third of your life sleeping, which means a third of your life is spent in these other dimensions. If those experiences are as real and consequential as Cayce insisted, then you're essentially living an entire parallel life that has profound impact on your spiritual development. And most people go through their entire earthly existence never once becoming conscious of this reality. They sleep, they forget, they dismiss dreams as random brain activity, and they miss the incredible opportunities available in those dimensional planes every single night. Are you one of those people? When you fall asleep tonight, will you be just another unconscious soul stumbling through the borderlands, or will you be a conscious traveler making the most of your time in the dream realms? The difference isn't small. According to Cayce, it's the difference between spiritual stagnation and accelerated growth, between living half a life and living fully across multiple dimensions of existence. Your soul already knows these realms, already travels there, already participates in this larger reality. The only question is whether your conscious mind will wake up to what's happening and start engaging intentionally with this profound aspect of your being. Cayce gave numerous examples in his readings of people whose lives transformed when they started taking their dream experiences seriously. Individuals received healing in the dream realms that manifested as physical recovery upon waking. People gained knowledge in dreams that they could later verify in waking life, proving they hadn't imagined or fantasized, but had accessed actual information from higher sources. Artists, inventors, and creative people reported receiving complete visions of their work in dreams, waking up with detailed plans they could immediately implement. Lucky accidents or rare gifts, Cayce taught that this is the natural result of developing conscious awareness of your multidimensional existence and learning to bridge the gap between your sleeping and waking consciousness. He also warned about the dangers of ignoring or suppressing your dream life. When you consistently dismiss your dreams, refuse to remember them, or convince yourself they're meaningless, you're essentially cutting yourself off from a major source of spiritual guidance and soul communication. Your higher self, your guides, and even the divine forces trying to help you develop will continue sending messages through dreams. But if you never pay attention, never remember, never act on the guidance offered, you're forcing yourself to learn everything the hard way through painful physical experiences instead of receiving the easier instruction available in the dream realms. Cayce suggested that many of life's difficulties, wrong turns, and missed opportunities stem directly from people ignoring the guidance their souls received during sleep. But beyond personal development, Cayce revealed that the dream realms play a crucial role in humanity's collective spiritual evolution. He taught that great souls, advanced beings, and what religious traditions call angels or ascended masters, work primarily in these higher dimensions, and they need conscious cooperation from embodied souls to accomplish their missions of raising Earth's vibration and helping humanity evolve. When you become conscious in the dream realms, when you raise your vibration high enough to access dimensions where this work happens, you can participate in efforts that affect not just your individual life, but the spiritual climate of the entire planet. Your sleeping hours could be spent in service to the divine plan, helping lost souls find the light, sending healing energy where it's needed, or learning advanced spiritual truths that you'll later teach others in some form during your waking life. This is the level of significance Cayce attributed to the dream realms. They're not just personal playgrounds or therapeutic processing centers. They're cosmic meeting grounds where the real spiritual work of the universe takes place, where souls of all development levels interact and learn, where the boundaries between past and future dissolve, and where you can step into your true nature as an eternal spiritual being temporarily inhabiting a physical form. Every night you sleep is an invitation to remember who you really are and what you're really capable of beyond the limitations of flesh and material existence. So what would Edgar Cayce say to you right now if he could look at your life, your sleep habits, your dream recall, your spiritual practices? He'd probably ask you some uncomfortable questions. When you lay down tonight, will you fall asleep with your mind full of television programs, social media drama, and material worries? Or will you consciously prepare yourself for spiritual experience? Will you wake up tomorrow with no memory of where your soul traveled and what it learned? Or will you have trained yourself to bridge that gap and bring back the wisdom available to you? Are you living a fully dimensional existence, or are you sleepwalking through both your waking and sleeping? Hours missing the incredible opportunities available in every moment. The dream realms exist, whether you believe in them or not. Your soul visits them whether you remember or not. The question isn't whether this is happening. According to Cayce, it absolutely is. The question is whether you'll wake up to the fuller reality of your existence and start living intentionally across all dimensions of your being. Because here's what Cayce understood that most people miss. You're not a physical being having occasional spiritual experiences. You're a spiritual being having a physical experience, and the dream realms are where you return every night to remember your true nature, receive guidance for your earthly mission, and participate in the larger spiritual reality that physical life is just one small part of. If this perspective changes how you view your sleep and dreams, if you're realizing you've been dismissing a third of your existence as meaningless, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and drop a comment sharing what you're going to do differently tonight when you go to sleep. How will you prepare? What intentions will you set? What are you hoping to remember when you wake up? Tonight, when you close your eyes, you'll travel to the dream realms again. You'll go whether you're conscious of it or not, whether you remember or not, whether you believe it or not. But now you know what Cayce knew. That journey matters. Those experiences are real. That time shapes your spiritual development and influences your waking life in ways most people never recognize. The souls you'll meet, the lessons you'll receive, the dimensions you'll traverse, these aren't fantasy or imagination. They're the larger reality, the fuller existence, the cosmic classroom where your soul does its deepest work. So prepare wisely. Fill your mind with what uplifts rather than what drags down. Forgive those you need to forgive, releasing the anchors that would trap you in lower dimensions. Set your intention to serve, to learn, to remember, to bring back the guidance your soul receives. Ask for protection and divine guidance. Align your will with higher purposes. And when you wake up, pause before you move. What do you remember? What did your soul experience while your body rested? What guidance are you meant to apply today? The dream realms are waiting. They're always there, always accessible, always offering opportunities for growth, learning, connection, and service. Edgar Cayce spent his life trying to wake people up to this reality, to help them understand that spiritual development isn't confined to waking hours and conscious practices. Your soul is working, learning, and evolving every moment of your existence, including and especially during the hours you call sleep. The only question is whether you'll become conscious of this larger life you're already living, or whether you'll continue sleepwalking through existence, missing the extraordinary experiences and opportunities available to you in dimensions that are just as real as the one you're sitting in right now. What will you choose? Will tonight be just another forgotten night of unconscious sleep, or will it be the beginning of your awakening to the fuller reality of your multidimensional existence? The dream realms aren't waiting for you to believe in them. They're waiting for you to remember them, to recognize them, to consciously participate in the spiritual life you're already living there every single night. Edgar Cayce opened this door in his readings. Now you have to decide whether you'll walk through it. What if the first words you speak each morning could literally reshape the atomic structure of your reality? Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet who gave over 14,000 psychic readings while in trance, insisted that certain ancient psalms contain vibrational frequencies that align human consciousness with divine creative forces before the day's chaos takes hold. This is not about religious ritual or empty repetition. This is about activating spiritual laws that Cayce claimed govern every moment of existence, laws that most people violate unknowingly within minutes of waking. The 7 psalms Cayce emphasized for morning practice were not randomly chosen. They emerged repeatedly across hundreds of his readings as precise spiritual technologies, each calibrated to address specific blockages between the human soul and its source. When you understand why Cayce connected these particular psalms to morning consciousness, when you grasp what he said happens in the invisible realms during those first waking moments, you will never approach a new day the same way again. Before your mind fills with worry, before your emotions react to circumstances, before your will commits to patterns that separate you from the divine, these 7 psalms create something Cayce called attunement, a word he used thousands of times to describe the single most important spiritual practice available to humanity. Leave a comment below sharing which psalm speaks most powerfully to your current life situation, and let's build a community of souls committed to starting each day aligned with the highest spiritual forces. Edgar Cayce spoke often about the morning hours as a sacred threshold, a time when the veil between the physical and spiritual dimensions remains thin from the night's sleep. During sleep, he explained in reading after reading, The soul literally leaves the physical body and travels into other realms of consciousness. Upon waking, there exists a brief window, perhaps 15 to 30 minutes, when the soul is still partially connected to these higher dimensions, before becoming fully absorbed back into material concerns and physical sensation. This transitional state, Cayce insisted, represents the most potent opportunity for spiritual work available in any 24-hour cycle. What you introduce into consciousness during this window doesn't just affect your mood or outlook. According to Cayce's cosmology, it actually determines which spiritual forces and influences will have access to your mental and emotional body throughout the coming day. The choice is not whether spiritual forces will influence you. The choice is which forces you will consciously invite versus which forces will enter by default through the doorways of fear, resentment, anxiety, and ego-based thinking. The 7 Psalms that Cayce recommended most frequently for morning practice were not presented as magic formulas or superstitious charms. He was emphatic across hundreds of readings that the vibrational quality of consciousness matters more than the specific words spoken. Yet he returned again and again to certain psalms because their language, their imagery, their emotional resonance had been refined over thousands of years of use by souls seeking attunement with the divine. These psalms had become, in Cayce's understanding, well-worn pathways in consciousness, grooves in the spiritual record that make attunement easier and more natural. When you use words and images that millions of souls have previously used for the same purpose, you tap into what Cayce sometimes called the collective unconscious, though he more often used the term universal consciousness or the Akashic records. You are not alone in your morning practice. You join an invisible congregation of souls across time who have sought the same connection, the same protection, the same guidance. Psalm 23 stands first among the 7, and Cayce mentioned it more frequently than perhaps any other single passage of Scripture. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." These opening words, Cayce explained, are not a statement of belief or hope. They are a declaration of spiritual law, a claiming of one's true identity as a soul under divine care and guidance. When you begin your day by affirming this relationship, you are not asking God to become your shepherd. You are acknowledging what is already and eternally true. The soul that knows itself as guided, protected, and provided for by the creative forces of the universe cannot be victimized by circumstances or enslaved by fear. Cayce emphasized that the entire psalm functions as a systematic cleansing of the most common fear-based thought patterns that dominate human consciousness. Fear of lack, I shall not want. Fear of exhaustion, he makes me lie down in green pastures. Fear of emotional turmoil, he leads me beside still waters. Fear of losing one's way, he restores my soul. Fear of darkness and evil, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Each line, Cayce suggested, should be absorbed slowly, meditated upon, allowed to sink from the conscious mind into the subconscious, where beliefs actually form and where the autonomic patterns of thought and emotion take shape. Speaking the psalm rapidly as mere words accomplishes little. Breathing the psalm into your consciousness as living truth, feeling each phrase dissolve a specific fear, this is the practice Cayce advocated. The 91st Psalm received equally strong emphasis in Cayce's readings, particularly for those facing specific dangers, challenges, or periods of intense stress. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. Cayce explained that dwelling and abiding are not passive states, but active choices of consciousness. Where does your mind dwell? What thoughts do you abide in? The soul that chooses to dwell in awareness of the Most High, in conscious connection with divine presence, creates around itself what Cayce called a protective shield, not a physical barrier, but a vibrational field that attracts helpful forces and deflects harmful ones. The psalm continues with extraordinary promises. No evil shall befall you, no plague come near your tent, for he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. Cayce took these promises absolutely literally, not in a superstitious sense, but in terms of spiritual law. When consciousness is attuned to the divine, when fear and negativity are not given room to operate, the soul naturally aligns with protective and benevolent forces in the unseen realms. The angels mentioned in Scripture, Cayce taught, are not separate beings bestowing arbitrary favors. They represent aspects of divine consciousness, patterns of helpful energy that flow naturally toward souls, vibrating at frequencies of faith, love, and trust. If you are finding value in these insights, take a moment now to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can continue receiving content that deepens your spiritual understanding and practice. Your engagement helps this message reach others who are searching for authentic spiritual wisdom. Psalm 121 functions as a morning affirmation of divine vigilance and care. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. Cayce pointed out that the question and answer format of this psalm reflects the natural dialogue between the conscious mind, which sees problems and challenges, and the higher self or soul, which knows the true source of assistance. In the morning, the conscious mind often wakes already burdened by the anticipated challenges of the day. This psalm redirects attention from problems to source, from circumstances to the creative power that brought all circumstances into existence. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. Every day involves going out into the world and coming back to yourself, engaging with external demands and returning to inner peace. Cayce taught that this rhythm of expansion and contraction, of activity and rest, of manifestation and meditation, must be consciously sanctified, deliberately placed under divine oversight rather than left to the ego's anxious management. Psalm 19 shifts focus from protection and guidance to revelation and wisdom. The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of His hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, night after night they reveal knowledge. Cayce loved this psalm because it speaks to the teaching function of creation itself. Before Scripture, before prophets, before any organized religion, the universe was already teaching, already revealing, already pouring forth knowledge about its creator. When you begin your day with this psalm, Cayce suggested, you attune yourself, not just to divine protection, but to divine instruction. You become receptive to the lessons embedded in everything you encounter. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The decrees of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. These lines remind us that spiritual law is not arbitrary or punitive, but perfect, designed to restore life and consciousness to their highest functioning. Many of Cayce's readings dealt with people suffering from the consequences of violating spiritual law through selfishness, materialism, sensuality, or other soul-damaging patterns. The Psalms, he emphasized, realign consciousness with these laws before the day's choices and reactions take form. Psalm 34 introduces the theme of experiential knowledge over theoretical belief. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in Him. Cayce appreciated this psalm's invitation to direct experience rather than second-hand doctrine. The spiritual life is not about believing the right things, but about tasting divine goodness in lived experience, about seeing divine action in real circumstances, about taking actual refuge in spiritual practices that produce tangible results. The psalm continues with practical wisdom. Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Morning is the time to establish the intention that will govern speech and action throughout the day. Cayce taught that speech carries tremendous creative power because thoughts crystallize into words, and words condition and direct the life force itself. What you speak, you reinforce in consciousness. What you reinforce in consciousness, you attract and manifest in experience. Beginning the day with a commitment to truthful, constructive speech creates a protection against the day's temptations to gossip, complain, criticize, or deceive. Psalm 37 addresses the problem that troubles most people on most mornings, the apparent success of those who do wrong, and the struggles of those trying to live rightly. Fret not yourself because of evildoers. Be not envious of wrongdoers, for they will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Cayce repeatedly counseled people struggling with feelings of injustice, resentment, and comparison. These emotions, he warned, are among the most destructive forces a soul can harbor because they corrupt the heart's purity and cloud spiritual perception. This psalm systematically dismantles the mental patterns that generate such emotions. Evildoers are not winning, they are fading. Your task is not to judge them, but to trust and do good regardless of appearances. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Cayce interpreted this not as a promise that God will fulfill your wishes if you worship properly, but as a statement about how consciousness transforms through spiritual practice. When you genuinely delight in divine presence, when communion with God becomes your primary joy, the very nature of your desires changes. You stop wanting things that harm you. You stop pursuing goals that scatter your energy. You start desiring what aligns with your soul's purpose, and those desires then manifest naturally because they are already aligned with divine will. Psalm 139 brings morning practice to its deepest and most intimate level. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. This psalm acknowledges what Cayce taught extensively, that nothing in consciousness is hidden from divine awareness, that the soul stands perpetually known and seen in its entirety. For many people this feels threatening, like living under constant surveillance, but Cayce pointed toward the liberating aspect of being fully known. You can stop pretending. You can stop performing. You can stop trying to appear spiritual while harboring thoughts and motives you know are not aligned with your highest self. The divine already knows everything and loves you anyway, and works with you exactly where you are. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. This is the prayer of a soul ready for transformation, ready to have illusions stripped away, ready to be led even when the leading requires painful honesty about one's own patterns and choices. The practice Cayce recommended is simple in structure, but profound in effect. Upon waking, before engaging with any technology or human interaction, sit quietly for a few moments, allowing your consciousness to settle. Then read through these 7 psalms slowly, not as literature but as spiritual technology, as keys that unlock specific aspects of consciousness. Some mornings, one psalm will resonate more strongly than others. Cayce encouraged people to trust that inner resonance, to spend extra time with whichever passage seems to vibrate with your current need. The goal is not to complete a ritual, but to achieve attunement. That specific quality of consciousness in which your thoughts, emotions, and will align with divine purpose. You will know attunement by how it feels, a sense of peace that has weight and substance, a clarity that cuts through confusion, a quiet joy that has nothing to do with circumstances. This attunement then becomes the foundation from which you meet the day. Decisions made from attunement tend to work out well because they come from a place of wisdom rather than fear. Reactions arising from attunement tend to be constructive rather than defensive because the ego has been temporarily quieted. Interactions conducted from attunement tend to uplift others because you are operating as a channel for something higher than your personal agenda. Cayce warned against approaching this practice with a consumer mentality, as if the Psalms are spiritual vending machines that dispense protection and blessing when you insert the right prayers. The Psalms work, he explained, not because the words have magical properties, but because your consciousness changes as you meditate on their meaning. That change in consciousness is the entire point. A soul vibrating with faith attracts different experiences than a soul vibrating with fear. A mind dwelling on divine promises produces different thoughts than a mind dwelling on worst-case scenarios. A heart filled with trust makes different choices than a heart filled with resentment. The morning psalms are not about manipulating God into giving you what you want. They are about transforming yourself into the kind of person who wants what aligns with divine purpose and who is therefore able to receive the good that has always been available. One more thing before we close. If this message has touched your heart, if these teachings from Edgar Cayce have illuminated something in your spiritual journey, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Your reflections and experiences Create a living conversation that benefits everyone in this community. Many people struggle with morning spiritual practice because they try to do it with willpower alone, fighting against their own resistance and the pull of immediate concerns. Cayce suggested a different approach. Go to bed with the intention of waking spiritually alert. Before sleep, review your day with an eye toward where you succeeded and failed in maintaining awareness of divine presence. Forgive yourself for the failures and give thanks for the successes. Then commit to beginning tomorrow differently, to giving God the first fruits of your consciousness rather than the leftovers after everything else has taken its share. This bedtime practice prepares the subconscious mind to cooperate with your morning intention. You will find that waking becomes easier, that reaching for the Psalms feels natural rather than forced, that the resistance gradually dissolves as the practice proves its worth through lived experience. The ultimate promise Cayce offered regarding these 7 Psalms is not about perfect days or problem-free lives. Life in a physical body will always involve challenges, losses, difficulties, and uncertainties. But the soul that maintains its morning attunement moves through these challenges differently. Problems still arise, but they do not define you. Losses still occur, but they do not destroy you. Difficulties still press in, but they do not overwhelm you. You discover that you have access to resources beyond your own strength, to wisdom beyond your own understanding, to peace that makes no logical sense given your circumstances. This is what it means to dwell in the shelter of the Most High, to walk through the valley of the shadow of death fearing no evil, to delight in the Lord until your very desires transform. This is the life Cayce described as spirit-filled, not in an emotional or ecstatic sense, but in the practical sense of being guided, protected, instructed, and sustained by forces greater than the ego and wiser than the conscious mind. Start tomorrow morning with these 7 Psalms. Approach them not as ancient poetry, but as living keys to transformation. Speak them slowly, feel them deeply, let them reshape the vibrational field of your consciousness before the day's demands flood in. Do this for 30 days and observe what changes. Cayce promised that the practice itself will prove its value, that you will not need to take anyone's word for it because you will taste and see directly that the spiritual laws he taught are as reliable as the physical laws that govern the material world. The morning is yours. The Psalms are freely available. The only question is whether you will give yourself this gift, whether you will invest these few minutes each day in aligning with the highest forces in the universe before giving your attention to everything else. Your life is waiting to be transformed. The doorway opens every morning. All you have to do is walk through it. There is a feeling rising inside you right now that cannot be ignored. A sensation so profound that it has brought you to this very moment, and Edgar Cayce knew exactly what it meant when you experience it. The sleeping prophet warned that when certain unmistakable signs begin manifesting in your daily life, your soul is no longer dormant, but actively awakening to its divine purpose. And what happens next will determine whether you embrace this transformation or let it slip away forever. In over 14,000 documented readings, Cayce revealed that spiritual awakening does not announce itself with trumpets or visions alone, but through specific feelings, sensations, and experiences that most people completely misunderstand or dismiss as coincidence, stress, or imagination. Right now, as you watch this video, you may be experiencing the very symptoms Cayce described almost a century ago. Symptoms that indicate your consciousness is expanding beyond the material world and touching something far greater. This is not abstract philosophy or wishful thinking. This is documented, verified information from a man who could diagnose illnesses while asleep, describe past lives with stunning accuracy, and reveal spiritual truths that science is only now beginning to confirm. If you've been feeling different lately, if unexplainable things have been happening, if you sense that reality itself is shifting around you, then what you are about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about your spiritual journey. Drop a comment below sharing which sign resonates most with your current experience, because your participation helps others realize they are not alone in this awakening. The first thing you must understand about spiritual awakening, according to Edgar Cayce, is that it rarely begins the way religious traditions taught you to expect. Cayce explained through his readings that the soul does not awaken through intellectual understanding alone, but through direct experience, And these experiences often start so subtly that most people completely overlook them until the signs become impossible to ignore. When someone would come to Cayce troubled by strange feelings or unexplainable sensations, he would frequently tell them that their spiritual centers, what Eastern traditions call chakras, and what Cayce referred to as spiritual glands, were beginning to activate after lifetimes of dormancy. This activation creates very specific feelings that you can identify right now in your own life. The most common initial feeling Cayce described was a sense of restlessness that has no external cause. You might have everything you thought you wanted, a decent job, relationships, security, yet something inside you feels profoundly unsettled. Cayce explained in reading after reading that this restlessness is actually your soul, recognizing that material satisfaction alone cannot fulfill your divine purpose. The soul begins sending signals to your conscious mind that something essential is missing, not in your external circumstances, but in your spiritual connection. This is not depression or dissatisfaction in the clinical sense. It is a holy discontentment, a divine dissatisfaction that pushes you towards seeking something greater. When you feel this, according to Cayce, your soul is literally waking up and demanding that you pay attention to why you incarnated in the first place. Closely connected to this restlessness is what Cayce called the intensification of sensitivity. People going through spiritual awakening frequently told Cayce they were becoming hypersensitive to everything around them. Loud noises felt unbearable, crowds drained their energy completely, and they could sense the emotions of others without anyone speaking a word. Cayce explained that this heightened sensitivity occurs because your spiritual body is developing faster than your physical body can comfortably integrate. The barrier between the material and spiritual dimensions begins thinning, which means you start perceiving things that most people around you cannot detect. You might walk into a room and immediately feel whether the atmosphere is peaceful or troubled. You might meet someone and instantly know whether they are trustworthy, not through logical deduction, but through direct spiritual perception. Cayce taught that this sensitivity, while often overwhelming at first, is actually a precious gift that allows you to navigate life with divine guidance rather than mere human reasoning. Another unmistakable sign that your awakening is beginning involves your relationship with sleep and dreams. Cayce himself received all his information while in a sleep state, and he repeatedly emphasized that dreams are the primary language through which the soul communicates with the conscious mind. When spiritual awakening starts, your dream life transforms dramatically. Dreams become vivid, memorable, and laden with symbolism that feels personally significant even if you cannot immediately interpret the meaning. You might start having dreams where you are flying, which Cayce said represents the soul traveling beyond physical limitations. You might dream of deceased loved ones who appear healthy and vibrant, delivering messages of comfort or guidance. You might experience dreams where you are studying in magnificent temples or receiving instruction from beings of light. Cayce taught that these are not mere fantasies created by your subconscious, but actual experiences your soul is having while your physical body rests. Pay attention if your dreams have become more intense, more colorful, more meaningful, because this indicates your soul is actively communicating the truths your waking mind needs to understand. Synchronicities multiply exponentially during spiritual awakening, and Cayce addressed this phenomenon long before Carl Jung gave it a formal name. When your awakening begins, you will notice that meaningful coincidences happen with stunning frequency. You think of someone you have not contacted in years, and within hours they reach out to you. You need specific information or help, and suddenly the exact book, article, or person appears seemingly by chance. You see repeating numbers, phrases, or symbols that carry personal significance. Cayce explained that these synchronicities occur because your consciousness is beginning to align with divine timing and divine order. The universe, or God, is not random according to Cayce, but operates according to precise spiritual laws, and when you awaken spiritually, you begin moving in harmony with these laws rather than against them. What appears as coincidence to the unawakened mind is actually divine providence guiding you exactly where you need to be. Physical sensations accompany spiritual awakening in ways that can genuinely frighten people if they do not understand what is happening. Cayce described how individuals would report tingling sensations running up their spine, feelings of energy or heat in specific parts of their body, or even brief moments where their body felt like it was vibrating at a different frequency. These physical sensations correspond to what Cayce called the rising of spiritual energy through the body's spiritual centers. In Eastern terminology, this is Kundalini awakening, but Cayce explained it in more Christian mystical terms as the Christ consciousness beginning to activate within you. When this energy rises, it can create temporary physical discomfort, including headaches, digestive issues, or exhaustion that medical examinations cannot explain. Cayce always recommended patience with these symptoms and emphasized maintaining balance through diet, exercise, meditation, and prayer rather than fighting against what your body is naturally experiencing. Time itself begins feeling different when spiritual awakening starts, and this is something Cayce addressed with remarkable consistency. Multiple people told Cayce that hours would pass like minutes when they were engaged in spiritual activities, prayer, meditation, or creative work, yet boring activities felt interminably long. Other people reported the opposite sensation, where time seemed to slow down during moments of crisis or profound experience, allowing them to perceive and react with unusual clarity. Cayce explained that this shifting time perception happens because you are beginning to experience reality as the soul experiences it, rather than as the physical body measures it. The soul exists in the eternal now, outside linear time, and as you awaken spiritually, you get glimpses of this timeless awareness even while still living in a time-bound physical body. When minutes feel like hours or hours feel like minutes, recognize that your consciousness is expanding beyond purely material perception. The people in your life will inevitably change during spiritual awakening, and Cayce prepared many individuals for this often painful transition. He explained that as you vibrate at a higher spiritual frequency, you will naturally move away from relationships based purely on material interests, ego gratification, or mutual dysfunction. Friends you have known for years might suddenly feel like strangers. Conversations that once engaged you now feel hollow and draining. Meanwhile, you will find yourself drawn to new people who resonate with your emerging spiritual awareness. These new connections often form quickly and feel unusually deep, as if you have known these souls before, and according to Cayce, you probably have. He taught extensively about soul groups, collections of souls who incarnate together lifetime after lifetime to help each other grow spiritually. When your awakening begins, you start recognizing members of your soul group, and old relationships that no longer serve your spiritual development naturally fall away to make room for connections that do. If you are experiencing any of these signs right now, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel, because understanding what is happening to you spiritually is not optional, but essential for navigating this transformation successfully. Share your own awakening experiences in the comments so others can see they are not alone in this journey. Your relationship with organized religion often shifts dramatically during spiritual awakening, and Cayce addressed this delicate issue with great wisdom. Many people told him they felt guilty for no longer connecting with the religious traditions of their childhood, even though they felt closer to God than ever before. Cayce consistently responded that true spirituality transcends any single religious institution or dogma. He emphasized that Jesus Christ taught universal spiritual principles that appear in all genuine religious traditions. Principles of love, forgiveness, service, and recognizing the divine within every soul. Your awakening might lead you away from rigid religious structures while simultaneously bringing you into direct personal relationship with the divine. And Cayce taught that this progression is completely natural and even necessary for spiritual maturity. The goal is not religion about God, but experience of God. Overwhelming compassion emerges during spiritual awakening in ways that can actually hurt. Cayce described how awakening individuals often reported crying spontaneously when witnessing suffering, feeling physical pain when others were in pain, or becoming unable to tolerate violence or cruelty, even in fictional entertainment. This heightened compassion occurs because the illusion of separation begins dissolving. You start recognizing at a deep soul level that the homeless person on the street, the suffering animal, the person who wronged you, all share the same divine essence that you carry. Cayce taught that this universal compassion is the natural fruit of awakening to Christ consciousness, which he defined not as something exclusive to Jesus, but as the awareness that God dwells within every living being. When you can no longer watch violence for entertainment or pass by suffering without being moved to help, your spiritual awakening is not making you weak, but is revealing your true strength, which is love. The search for life purpose intensifies unbearably during spiritual awakening. Cayce dealt with countless individuals who came to him desperate to understand why they were here and what they were supposed to do with their lives. He would frequently tell them that they had asked this question in prayer or meditation, and the awakening they were experiencing was God's direct answer. Your purpose, according to Cayce, is always connected to using your unique gifts and talents in service to others while developing your own soul's understanding of its divine nature. The restlessness you feel is your soul pushing you toward this purpose, even if your conscious mind cannot yet see the complete picture. Trust the process, Cayce advised, because the divine plan unfolds step by step, not all at once. Your job is to remain faithful and attentive to the guidance you receive through dreams, intuition, synchronicity, and that still small voice within. Ancient spiritual teachings suddenly make perfect sense when your awakening begins, and this was something Cayce experienced personally and described in others. Texts that seemed confusing or irrelevant before now read as if written specifically for you and your current situation. The parables of Jesus, the wisdom literature of the Bible, mystical poetry, philosophical texts, all become transparently clear because you are no longer reading them with only your intellectual mind, but with spiritual understanding. Cayce taught that all souls carry memories of truth from previous lifetimes and from their existence in spiritual realms before incarnation. When awakening begins, these soul memories start surfacing, which is why ancient wisdom suddenly resonates so powerfully. You are not learning something entirely new, but remembering what your soul has always known. Music, art, and nature affect you with almost unbearable intensity during spiritual awakening. A beautiful piece of music might move you to tears without understanding why. A sunset or mountain vista fills you with a sense of transcendent meaning. Poetry or visual art speaks to something deep within you that has no adequate words. Cayce explained that beauty is one of the primary languages God uses to communicate with awakening souls. When you are moved by beauty, you are actually experiencing a moment of direct contact with the divine intelligence that created all beauty. These moments are not sentimental or superficial, but are genuine spiritual experiences that nourish and guide your developing awareness. Increased intuition and knowing things without logical explanation becomes commonplace when spiritual awakening begins. You might know who is calling before checking your phone, anticipate events before they happen, or receive sudden insights about people or situations that prove accurate. Cayce himself operated from this level of consciousness constantly while in trance, but he taught that all humans possess these abilities in varying degrees. During awakening, the veil between your conscious mind and your superconscious mind, your connection to universal knowledge, becomes thinner. Information flows more freely, which results in experiences of knowing without knowing how you know. Cayce consistently advised people to trust this intuitive guidance, test it against results, and develop it through regular meditation and prayer. Meditation and prayer shift from obligation to necessity during spiritual awakening. Before awakening, you might have practiced these disciplines sporadically or out of guilt. Now you find yourself craving quiet time, silence and solitude in ways that feel like genuine thirst or hunger. Cayce explained that this happens because your soul is actively receiving spiritual nourishment through prayer and meditation, and once you experience this nourishment directly, your entire being naturally seeks it regularly. The specific form matters less than the sincerity, Cayce taught. Whether you pray on your knees, meditate in lotus position, walk in nature in prayerful awareness, or simply sit in quiet receptivity, you are creating space for divine communication. Past life memories or flashes of knowledge about previous incarnations sometimes surface during spiritual awakening, and Cayce provided more information about reincarnation than perhaps any other Christian mystic in modern times. He explained that you do not remember past lives casually or for entertainment, but when those memories are directly relevant to healing current issues or understanding present relationships. You might visit a place for the first time, yet feel overwhelming familiarity. You might meet someone and instantly feel powerful connection or aversion based on past life history. You might have inexplicable fears or talents that make complete sense when understood through the lens of previous incarnations. Cayce taught that recognizing these past life influences allows you to work through karma more consciously and make better choices in this present lifetime. The concept of karma itself becomes experientially clear rather than intellectually abstract during awakening. Cayce taught that karma is not punishment, but simply the law of cause and effect operating across lifetimes, and when you awaken spiritually, you begin seeing this law in action. You notice that the energy you send out returns to you with remarkable consistency. The judgments you make about others, you later face yourself. The love you give multiplies and comes back in unexpected ways. This growing awareness of karmic law transforms how you think, speak, and act, because you realize with increasing clarity that you are literally creating your future experiences through your present choices. Your tolerance for dishonesty, drama, and toxic behavior drops to zero during spiritual awakening, which can create significant life disruptions. Jobs that once felt tolerable become absolutely unbearable if they require you to compromise your integrity. Relationships built on manipulation or codependency naturally end or transform. Entertainment that glorifies darkness, cruelty, or meaninglessness no longer holds any appeal. Cayce explained that this is your soul asserting its true values and refusing to tolerate what does not align with your divine nature. This process can be lonely and frightening, especially if it means leaving behind security, but Cayce promised that when you honor your soul's truth, the universe conspires to support you in ways you cannot anticipate from your limited human perspective. Physical detoxification often accompanies spiritual awakening as well. You might suddenly lose your taste for alcohol, caffeine, processed foods, or heavy meals that you consumed without thought before. Your body begins craving purer, simpler, more natural foods. Cayce was far ahead of his time in emphasizing the connection between physical health and spiritual development. He taught that the body is the temple of the living God, and that what you put into your body directly affects your ability to maintain high spiritual vibration. When awakening begins, your body's innate wisdom activates and starts guiding you toward foods and habits that support rather than hinder your spiritual growth. Take a moment now to subscribe if you have not already, and make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss videos that support your spiritual journey. Comment below with one word describing where you are in your awakening process. The most profound feeling that Cayce associated with genuine spiritual awakening is an unshakable sense that everything is unfolding according to divine plan, despite external circumstances appearing chaotic. This does not mean naive optimism or denying real problems. It means experiencing deep peace that surpasses intellectual understanding, peace that remains steady even when life brings challenges, losses, or transitions. Cayce repeatedly told people that this peace is the direct presence of Christ consciousness within them, the awareness that they are never alone, never abandoned, and always held within divine love. When you feel this peace arising spontaneously, especially in circumstances where peace makes no logical sense, you are experiencing the most reliable sign that your spiritual awakening is authentic and progressing beautifully. You might also notice a growing detachment from outcomes that once consumed you with anxiety. Whether certain plans succeed or fail, whether people approve or disapprove, whether you gain or lose material things, these external circumstances lose their power to disturb your inner equilibrium. Cayce taught that this detachment is not indifference or apathy, but rather the freedom that comes from trusting divine timing and divine providence completely. You continue making efforts, setting goals, and engaging with life, but your happiness and peace no longer depend on specific outcomes. This is spiritual maturity according to Cayce, living fully in the world while knowing your true home is in the eternal. If you have been experiencing these signs, Edgar Cayce would tell you that your spiritual awakening is not something you need to force or manufacture. It is already happening, orchestrated by your soul in cooperation with divine guidance. Your responsibility is simply to remain open, attentive, and willing to follow where the Spirit leads. Maintain your practices of prayer and meditation. Trust your intuition even when it contradicts conventional wisdom. Honor your body as sacred. Cultivate compassion for yourself and others. Release relationships and situations that no longer serve your highest good. And above all, remember that this awakening is not about becoming someone different, but about remembering who you truly are, a divine spiritual being created in God's image, temporarily inhabiting physical form to learn, grow, and ultimately return consciously to unity with your Creator. Every feeling, every experience, every challenge you encounter during this awakening is perfectly designed to facilitate that sacred return journey. Trust the process completely and know that you are never walking this path alone.